Hello guys, what I want to do is I want to take you through how to cut a haunched mortise and tenon joint. So we've got the mortise part here. I've not quite finished the marking out on that. Alright, we will be going through that in another video, how to actually mark it all out and get it perfect. I've got the little tenon part here, which is haunched. Alright, so the haunch is on there. I've got a little 10mm haunch on it. You can see that all marked out. So there's certain ways you need to go about cutting things like this tenon out, so that it ends up basically being cut right and accurately. Alright, so I'm going to run through that. First thing though I want to just share with you is the way I mark this out. So what I've got is I have all the stuff, all the information is on the front, but what I get is there's nothing on the top here. I could take the mortise gauge and mark my lines across the top, but what happens is people tend to take the top of this and they mark all the way across here with the mortise gauge. What they find is they get a very ugly mark that they can't get out while sanding. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to just take this and I'm going to use my finger. I'll try and get you into focus here. So I'm going to use my finger just to simply trace along the lines. And by tracing along the lines, like so, what I avoid is I avoid any of those unsightly marks that I might get after sanding. Another way to do that is obviously to leave a little kind of 2-3 mils on the top end of that. And once I've got that, I can then just simply measure along and get my 10 mils on there as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop for now and I'm going to get a few things set up and then we can continue. Okay, for most of you this will not be mind-blowing stuff, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out. So we've got this added difficulty of the haunch on the front here, and this is the thing that always catches people out. Often this is removed far too early in the sequence, so what happens is you end up with something that's not as accurate, because once you remove this you then need to mark all your detail onto the tenon. So we should be able to keep this on for long enough to cut that piece out, but also cut all the other lines. Alright, so the last thing that should be removed are pretty much the cheeks of the wood. So these faces here should be removed very last. That's the last thing you do. Often what happens is people cut down here, then they remove these cheeks, and then all your markings disappear. So I'll just go through the sequence. So I've got it at a nice 45-degree angle. I've got my tenon saw, and what I want to do is I want to keep this on the 45-degree angle, and I'm going to cut through with the tenon saw. So cut down that line, leave a little bit of extra. If you can leave about 5 mils of waste on there, it's absolutely, not 5 mils, sorry, 0.5 mils. So a little bit of waste on there all the way down that line. That is absolutely perfect. So run down to your distance, same again. Alright, I just want to stop at the right depth. Oop, having trouble starting that. I'll just twist the saw just a little bit. There we go, that's me in. So run along at 45. Keep on blowing the dust out the way so you can continue to see your line that you're cutting to. There I am, down at the 45. Then spin it round. Okay, you don't want to ever be cutting, don't ever have it so it's like that and you're cutting this way into the top of the wood. What will tend to happen is you'll tend to break up the top of the wood, or it just won't cut really. So get this in the right direction. So that's me 45 degrees again, or thereabouts. Then go ahead and start sawing, following the other line. And do the same on the other one. Oh, I've missed my line a little bit. Just cut in a little bit. There we go. Run it down. And then stand it up. So I'm just simply going to stand it up in the vise now, because what I can do now is I can saw straight down. I've got my levels at both sides, so this is all about removing the waste in the middle that you've still got. And take your time with this, you don't need to saw as fast as me. Nice and slow, and essentially take it down to your levels there. At this point, this is where what you'll do sometimes is you'll take this, take it out of the vise, put it on a saw board, cut off those two sides. What you need to be doing is you need to take the haunch off. So that haunch there is now up for grabs, so you can cut that off. Oh, sorry, I'll get that a better place in the camera here. So this part now is going to come off. So I'm just going to pause it, get a better angle. So here we go, just using the tenon. I'm going to keep it up at an angle, drag it back. This again, you can leave, if you can leave like a 0.5 mil of waste, absolutely perfect. down. Take that, get it back on your angle. And then finish your cut. So essentially you've got your haunch off, you've already got your other part cut, so now you can concentrate on removing these cheeks. Okay, so there's now two ways of kind of removing these cheeks. One is essentially taking the saw board and putting that in. So put the saw board in, get your piece of wood, and that can go all the way to the top of the saw board, and we saw that off. Alright, so that's a dead simple method of doing it. If you don't feel comfortable doing it this way, you can either have it so you've got a bit of scrap wood under it and it's clamped. If you're quite careful, you can get it into the vise and just simply cut down that line and get that sawn off as well. I'm not going to bore you with that. I think you should be alright with that. But, well, here we go. I'll cut it off. Cut off one side, but I will not bore you by doing both, alright? So, run it down. Take it easy. Get it in the right position. And there we go. We've got that part off. So you can see I've got the haunch all cut. This part's been taken off. It's still got a little 1/2 mil of waste that I can trim off with the chisel. I would just need to go ahead and finish that side, and that will give me my whole finished side. Alright? Okay, so now it's the mortise side. So I have seen a lot of weird and wonderful ways on how to take this out, mostly by pupils that haven't really listened. So what I want to do is I want to show you a very simple and quick way. Oh, I say I'm going to show you, I'm going to tell you, and then essentially you'll see the finished product once I've done it. So what I have is I have my mortise, and what I've done is I've just sketched, well, I've marked a line down the middle there. I've used a bit of the finger gauge and just ran a line along the middle. What I'm going to do, this is 6mm wide. What I want to do is I want to keep it nice and accurate. So I can chisel this all out with a mortise chisel. That sometimes is just a little bit time consuming. And for most people, they get a little bit frustrated and then they end up making a mess of it. I do prefer to remove it all with a mortise chisel, but it's all about what your preference is. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take a cut. So I'm going to actually take a spur drill and I'm going to drill in there, I'm going to drill in there, I'm going to drill in there 4 times. And what that should do is it should clear most of the waste out. And once I've got that as well, because I can take the distance down the side properly with the depth stop and the drill, so I can take it down the side here, I'll have actually like all this on the same level with drilling down. So it should make it a lot easier for me to take that mortise chisel and actually reach the depth that I'm after. Right, okay, so I've drilled them out with a spur drill. I've got to the point where I've probably left too much in here. So I could get 4 drill holes here, but I didn't quite get it all the way to the end. So I'm going to use the mortise chisel to take that out. Sometimes what you'll find is this part will start to break. Hopefully that will not happen because I've got enough space on this side for waste to get pushed in the way. Alright, but you can see that I've got the holes all kind of cut there. So what I can do is I can start off just by mortising this part here. So I'm just going to whack down on it. And you can see how much easier that has become a rectangular hole. Alright, I'm just going to move up a little bit onto here. I'm just going to turn the chisel around so the flat edge is towards the next side. And I can knock that down. And that takes a good amount of the waste out of there. Try not to wrench it too much. We want to still keep the edges nice and clean and well cut. So I'll do the same on there, just knock down. I've also got a little bit of tape on there so I know how deep I'm going. So knock it all the way down. Same again in this part here. I'm just going to finish this first part of the joint off, knocking it all the way down. You might find that I'm just needing to take a little bit off the width, but I can do that afterwards with a bevel edge chisel. And then what I want to do is just come to the top here and I'm going to start knocking this down. Alright, that will take probably a little bit more of a hit because essentially it is not got a hole in it. Alright, so give it a bit of a whack and hopefully it'll break up alright and not cause me too much of a problem. Keep pushing that into the inside of the joint. I don't want to try and push it out the way because that's going to cause me problems with my haunch. I want to keep that as intact as I possibly can. and just slowly go about trimming it. So I've got about as far as I can go there with the camera sitting over the top. I'm just going to have a little bit of a mess about with it. So I'll show you how to take the haunch off straight after this. Right, okay, so I've trimmed this all out just like a normal mortise chisel. You can see there, it's not as bonny as it would be if I was to just use a mortise chisel all the way through and not do the drilling, but the quickness savings are brilliant. So time saving wise, it's absolutely perfect for what I'm trying to do. It's the same kind of technique you would probably use on like a building site, because you're not going to have access to a mortise machine. Also, SQA don't like you doing it with the mortise machine, and you need to make sure that you're doing it by hand, or you can lose all the marks for the part that you're working on. So I'm now going to remove this. I'm just going to use the saw. So I've got it tilted on a little bit of angle. I think I want it a little bit shallower, like so. Often what people try and do is they try and take this out with a mortise chisel. Don't do that. That's a terrible way of doing it. So all you do is you take your tenon saw and you're just going to use the very top of the tenon saw. Really get in there and make sure that this is going to stay steady while you do this. So draw it back a couple of times. I've got my hand in there just trying to make sure it's absolutely staying on where I want it. Maybe a little bit far away from the line compared to where I wanted it, but I'm just going to continue. So just using the tip of the saw. This part here, you shouldn't be able to scar the rest of your wood by skipping out of this hole if you're doing it as carefully as me. So I'm just going to run it back again. This will take a little bit of time, but it shouldn't take a huge amount of time. So bear with it. So now what you've got is you've got this little bit in there that you need to remove. Don't take the mortise chisel. It's used for vertical chiseling. So what you want is a little thin bevel edge chisel if you've got one, and essentially just knock it a couple of times, and you should be able to just chip that out of there. No bother. This is maybe a little bit, I've gone a little bit tight on the hole, to be honest, but I'm getting away with it, so I can push the blade in, maybe ever so slightly diagonally, and it will still lift it out. Alright, just as carefully as you can. Then you can go in here and you can give this a little bit of a trim. What I'll use is a little bit of a bigger bevel edge chisel, because it just makes sense. And I can run that stuff down there. Because it's going with the grain as well, it should be an easy trim as you're doing this. Alright. One thing that I haven't done here is I haven't gone through how to trim the tenon or anything like that. I'm guaranteeing that it'll probably not fit at this moment in time. Often what happens is people will try and get everything right to start off with, whereas at this point, that's me trimmed to those lines. I've maybe got a little bit of a squint on there. I can compare it with my tenon there. The tenon will not fit in. I'm going to need to spend a bit of time on that. I want that to be bigger so that I can get that in and get it sitting right. So now what I've got is I've got a hole that should receive it. Clean that all up. Then I'm just working on the tenon and trying to get that trimmed. Once I've got that trimmed, this should all go together. The haunch should fit in there, and we should have an absolutely perfect joint. Alright, so hopefully that helps.